Welcome to the Senior Care Conversation. I am your host, Hillary Bailey, and today we are addressing one of the most painful realities that families face, and that is when siblings and relatives cannot agree on how to care for a loved one. These disagreements can often escalate, leaving both relationships and the person needing care at risk. Joining me today is Denea High-Easton, licensed in both Texas and Massachusetts. She is an attorney, and with her background in social work and expertise in estate planning, guardianship, all the things, probate law, she is a boss. She brings not only knowledge, but also compassion to families in crisis. So, Denea, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So families, we're just going to dive right into this. So families sometimes think that documents are going to solve everything. But when there's emotions involved, relationships are involved, conflict obviously can intensify, especially when you have families with lots of siblings. So the challenge is always balancing fairness, protection, and peace within the family unit, which can be very difficult. So why do you believe legal disagreements among siblings get so heated during the caregiving decisions?
Well, I think the biggest thing, first and foremost, is that there's no communication before something happens and a caregiver needs to be appointed. I feel like that is the biggest stressor amongst families because they're not having the conversations early enough to know what to expect. So the people who are, I'm going to say proposed wards because that's just kind of me going into my guardianship world, but people who are incapacitated or need to be put somewhere because they can't take care of it themselves, they are in a position where they are not vocal at the time when they need to be moved and placed, or they're not having those conversations with their children and or their family members or their friends early enough. So then everybody is stuck saying, well, what are we supposed to do? And so when you have that situation available or happening, what happens is everybody has an opinion. When everyone has an opinion, everyone wants, something to go a certain type of way, and emotions can get involved, and they feel like they've been around for their family member who needs to go away or who needs to be cared for. So they feel like they should have a higher opinion of others. And so having those conversations not early enough are like the main reason why there's conflict amongst family members. And then emotions will follow suit after that. So I think if people are willing and wanting and hoping to have the conversations early enough, I think it can solve a lot of future conflict down the line.
I think also I've seen it in my work, and we've talked about this. I think this has come up with on every one of my shows because it's just such an issue in every situation with family members and caregiving. I think sometimes parents are afraid to upset one of their children because maybe they want this certain child to do this certain child to do that, and they don't want to have that conversation with everybody. So they kind of go to one child and say, "Oh, well, I would like for you to do this," or and then I would like for you to do this. And they worry too much about hurting feelings instead of talking about what they actually want. And then I think, you know, people, we do, as children, we do get our feelings hurt. And so then we lash out at the parents. So there's just so much behind the family dynamic. So,
There is.
yeah. How do you feel like the clear legal planning can reduce that conflict? Like putting that in place?
Well, you know what? Having the conversations early enough and actually speaking with an attorney, right? Having an estate plan in place, putting documents in place. I personally do something where I do something called family meetings, where the parents that are having those difficult conversations or lack thereof, right? They're afraid to have the conversations like you just discussed. They can actually have those conversations with me. I mean, obviously, they have to sign a waiver and make sure that I can speak to all of the family members, but it basically puts a buffer so that way they can feel comfortable enough after their estate plan is done to talk about the things that they're afraid to talk about to their children because they don't want to hurt their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And so putting estate plan documents in place, like, a will, a durable power of attorney, a medical power of attorney, and I can get into those specifics in a second, but
Awesome.
having the documents, speaking with an attorney, making sure you have your plan in place will alleviate so much conflict down the line. We can prevent it, right? I mean, it sounds crazy to say that, but we can actually prevent conflict in your families if we have the conversation, you have a proper estate plan in place, and then, you can come find me and I can be able to do something called a family meeting where we can talk about those issues because the lack of communication is the very reason why families are put in these terrible and sad dynamics in the long run.
Absolutely. So in some ways, you play the mediator.
I do. I do. And, me being a social worker in the past, I think it kind of prepared me for this. Now, I'm going to put on the record, I'm not officially a mediator, so I'm not saying that in any regard. All I'm doing is relaying the information about my client's estate plan once everything is drafted, once they've been able to tell me exactly what they're looking to do, and just having those open and honest conversations with their kids or their family members or their friends. So that way they're aware of what to expect in the event that, the clients become incapacitated, something needs to be done, they need to be moved out of the house. So then that way there's no confusion because that's where a lot of the issues come in, right? When children, family members are confused about where do they look, what are they supposed to do, who do they contact, where all their stuff's supposed to be. And so if we can find a way to eliminate that or at least reduce the amount of questions that people have, they can address those questions with their family members right there in that meeting, right? So I'm not really necessarily mediating, I'm just kind of there as a little bit of a buffer. And if the parents are too afraid to say, hey, listen, this is what we want to do, I'll say it for them, right? That's the beauty of having an attorney to be able to speak up on their behalf. So I'm their advocate, I'm their counselor. The social worker in me is kind of in that kumbaya thing. I became a lawyer not to become the person that's constantly trying to create conflict. I want to reduce it as much as possible.
I absolutely love that. So I know a lot in my work when a family has, more than one sibling, they all want to be heard. And sometimes they feel overlooked. And so they might come to me on the side, and say, hey, I really feel like this is going on and that's going on. How do you handle situations like that where maybe someone in the family kind of comes to you on the side because they feel overlooked and they want to be heard?
Well, the biggest thing I say is that obviously I represent their parents, right? So if we're talking about the scenario where their parents are doing an estate plan, they want to talk to me, my clients are your parents. So in regards, I can listen. And I think it's important that a lot of attorneys will listen, but they might not act on that person's wishes and their desires because we're not representing them as the client. But in my family meetings, I feel as though it's a really good opportunity for, children, friends, family, whoever is a part of that meeting to voice their opinions and voice their emotions and voice how they feel and not just talk to me about it, but talk to the person who is my client. So that way they can have a well-rounded understanding of what it is that they want to talk about, how they want to be heard. And I think just having that space to allow people to be open makes them feel more comfortable in the long run, even if their parents don't listen to what they want to do, right? Because at the end of the day, the clients are going to dictate exactly what they want because that's the power of estate planning, right? But the people who are involved can still have a space to have that conversation. And I think it's very important that, they do. I might not be able to act on it because, like I said, my clients are going to be the people who sign my engagement agreement, but I will provide a space to allow them to have and voice their concerns because I think it's very important that they're heard.
So just because I'm all about education and I love to learn as well, and I think our viewers will benefit from this. When would a mediator, I know you said you're not officially a mediator, when is a mediator necessary and what do they do?
Well, a mediator is a person, they're a neutral third party that comes in and listens to the sides of whoever is in conflict and tries to come up with an agreement so that everyone is on the same page. That's kind of the basic way that I can explain it.
Okay.
As far as when a mediator is needed, I mean, it just really depends on the family dynamic because every single family is completely different. So some families are not going to need a mediator, others may desire one, right? During the estate planning process, it's not very typical for a mediator to get involved because, like I said, families, the clients themselves, so the people who are actually executing their estate plan, they're the ones that get to dictate exactly what they want, and they don't have to listen to anybody else about what other people's opinions are. They can listen to their emotions of their kids, but at the end of the day, they still get to choose what they want to do for their plan. As far as mediation for conflict amongst the family members, I always say you can always mediate for that, right? If anybody ends up dying or if people are in a situation where they have to seek a guardianship because there are no estate planning documents in place, sometimes a mediator will be helpful, right? Because then we can decide who's going to serve as a guardian of the person who's no longer able to make decisions for themselves, right? Or if somebody's passed away, who is going to serve as the administrator of the estate, which is basically the person who goes to the probate court and says, this person has passed away. I need to make sure that all of their assets are paid for, all of their debt is paid, all the taxes are paid. So a lot of times people, when there's been no estate plan in place, and that includes for probate when someone's died and incapacitation when someone has no, durable power of attorney or medical power of attorney. What happens is, right, a mediator will be so perfect to work with because they can help to prevent more court costs going into a case because they can't agree on who's going to serve as the administrator or agree on who's going to be the guardian. So it
Mhm.
just really depends on the family dynamic. It depends on the situation itself. I always encourage people talk to an attorney to find out if a mediator is in your best interest because I think it will be very, very helpful to alleviate some future court costs down the line.
So the last question I was going to ask you is, what piece of advice would you give families who want to keep the peace? But it sounds like to me, plan early is the answer.
Plan early, communicate. Those are my
Yes.
two favorite things to say. Communicate, plan early. And it's important to make sure that you find an estate planning attorney who resonates with you, right? Because you want them to be able to listen to what your desires are, your wants, your goals, your wishes, and how to make sure that your family is taken care of after you're gone or you become incapacitated.
All right, guys, we are going to be right back. Up next, we're going to tackle caregiver burnout and the legal steps we can actually take to make caregiving easier. We'll be right back with more insight, expert advice, and stories that matter to every generation.